Good morning again, General. Thank you for taking some time to be with us. And let me first start by commending you for your transparency efforts. I think Pennsylvania has a lot to be proud of for your work and your continued work on transparency. And I know while you were in the House, we worked together on those things, and it's great to see you continuing to do that. I just want to revisit something that happened in September. In September, you joined with the Treasurer, and I'm sure we'll talk to him about this, the office, a little bit later, but you joined with the Treasurer for what seemed to be something pretty routine. You had a press conference for the need for a short-term investment program to cover the expenses because of the way the revenue comes in and the expenses go out. It seemed like a fairly routine process, but there was a need to have a press conference then. Can you maybe talk about why you felt that your department should join in on that conversation?
Yeah, two things. Number one, I want to commend you on your transparency efforts as well. We actually incorporated your idea when you proposed School Watch into both our charter school report and what we've proposed moving forward, because we think that specifically came, I guess, what imitation is the best form of flattery. So that specifically came from your idea in our charter school report. Specifically on the press conference in September, it did seem routine at the time, and most people thought it was. We now find out why it was not routine. I think the last drawdown of that just happened, of that loan just happened this past Friday. And I am very concerned about the cash flow situation of the state, and I'm also concerned about the long-term fiscal situation where we have to take out, in a sense, short-term loans to fund general government operations of the state. So that press conference in September was basically raising an alarm for how far we were dipping close to zero, and actually without that loan we would have actually been in the negative territory on our general government cash operations. So the specific reason for that press conference was about raising the alarm to let people know exactly how tough the situation was.
Right, and I would also just ask a follow-up to that. Last Friday, as you mentioned, I think the Wolf administration and the Treasury reached an agreement to increase that amount by about 30%. Did you feel necessary to put out your same warning now that they had to increase it again, or have you stated your point thus far, and the Auditor General will not be weighing in on those short term?
I stated my point in September. Unfortunately, I found out about that one in the newspaper. That one was one that they did not come to me. I would have made it very clear how I felt. And by the way, it likely was necessary, but that was one that the Treasurer and the Governor's office worked out. I found out about that Friday night. I read about that online on my phone. And then I was asked by the Treasurer's office whether I would acknowledge that, and I felt it was entirely inappropriate to acknowledge something that had already happened.
And also, you would say that the warning still exists.
Absolutely.
Your concerns are still relevant.
Yeah, I apologize for cutting off. If you look back at what I said there, I think everything that I said at that press conference has borne out to be true. If anything, I was slightly more optimistic on when we would hit zero in our cash balances. And I believe going forward, without structural changes to our state government, those type of things are going to continue to be necessary.
One point to that, about a comment that was reported in the Lancaster Online. You said that you believe part of the problem was overly optimistic revenue projections in this budget. But fast forward to now 6 months later, revenues are exceeding expectations on this year. 6 months later, do you still have those same concerns that we were overly optimistic in this budget?
Without trying to be funny about this, I try to be conservative on revenue estimates. I would rather anticipate, for example, with municipal pensions, getting 5% rate of return and end up getting 9%. I try to do that when it comes to our own household budget. You try to be conservative. So I think it is good for all of us that revenues are going up. That is an absolutely good thing. But when it comes to, in my view, passing a budget, I would rather err on the side of caution, and turned out we have excess revenue coming in that we could put into a rainy day fund perhaps for down the line, as opposed to playing it right on the line or being too optimistic, and then we get into a jam mid-budget. And when it's a jam mid-budget, what ends up happening is the governor ends up becoming, without needing to consult the legislature, the arbiter of what gets cut and what doesn't.
General, keep up the good work, and once again, thank you for putting that school watch in your report. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for your work, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's so nice to see you, General. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Representative.
I still miss seeing you on the House floor and being able to chat with you informally like that.
I miss it sometimes, but on those late night sessions, that's where I maybe don't miss it quite as much.
I feel they're in our future soon. General, you were adamant. You said it not once but twice. Write this down about the Scranton fire pension system at 16%. And I wrote it down, and it's certainly scary. But I also wrote down when you said that you hadn't been in consultation with the governor's office regarding the municipal pensions. And I recognize that the administration is still young and has had a lot on their plate. But I was a bit alarmed, too, that when you said you read about the recent borrowing in Friday night's paper, which just, you've been doing a great job. And you've been a leading spokesman in terms of making the front page and saying we must be doing things about statewide pension reform. Have you been in consultation with this administration about statewide pension reform? And of your 13 recommendations for the municipal reform, do they translate for state pension reform? I guess what I'm getting at, too, is, where are you able to comment upon, or would you please comment upon the plans to eliminate management fees? You did talk about that, and these are plans that I heard in the governor's budget address. Selling bonds, modernizing liquor to pay those bonds, but then, more importantly, a sales tax increase to fund this.
Right. A couple of things. First of all, onto the working, when the governor or the governor-elect won his election, during the transition, we talked a couple of times, and every time I talked to him, I brought up municipal pension. He promised me that we would work together. And granted, they've had a lot of issues on their plate, so I'm sure that day is going to come when we're going to work together on this. And I look forward to that discussion. It's going to be, it's going to be a tough solution, but I look forward to working with them on this. It is not necessarily the same way you would fix a municipal pension system to fixing the state system. To me, there's no question that there's underfunding, so part of that is you got to find some revenue to put into it. But again, I go back to what Pittsburgh did. They sold their Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, and they put in more revenue in a booming stock market, and they still fell further behind. So obviously, that in and of itself is not the fix. But there's no way some revenue isn't going to be part of that, however that comes about. But to me, if anybody is looking for sort of the one fix, if we just do this, that'll fix it. Now, this is going to be one of those ones where it's going to have to be a comprehensive fix. It's looking at both, to be blunt, the money put in, and then how the money comes out.
Okay, thank you. It's just my hope that with all the work that you've done in the last few years and while in the legislature that you will be having a voice in that. And I understand that your position isn't policy, it's audit, but I still have a lot of respect for that. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done. I know I've had some constituents reach out to you independent of my office, and you've been proactive on their behalf and put some of their concerns at ease. So thanks. Great job.
Thank you, Representative.